Okay. I want to start today with a scenario that I think every single person listening has either experienced personally or, watched a friend go through.
Okay.
You sign up for a 5K, maybe a half marathon, you buy the fresh gear, you make the playlist, you're feeling heroic. You get 3 weeks in, you're feeling great, and
The
then
betrayal.
total betrayal. The knee starts throbbing or the shin feels like it's being split with a chisel, and just like that, you are on the couch.
Hmm.
I was looking at the numbers and the sun-dried materials we're covering today, and honestly, they terrified me. Depending on which study you look at, nearly 80% of runners get sidelined by an injury every single year.
It is a staggering statistic.
Mm.
I mean, if you think about it, the incidence rates are reported anywhere between, 19% all the way up to nearly
Oh, it's
80%.
huge.
It's almost a coin flip, or
Right.
worse, whether you'll make it through a training block unscathed. If cars broke down 80% of the time, we'd all be walking.
We absolutely would. And naturally, when something goes wrong, when the body breaks, we start looking for a villain. We want to know who or what did this to us.
Right.
And usually in the running world, the finger gets pointed at one specific thing, the foot strike.
The dreaded footstrike.
Mm.
It is the central pillar of debate in the running community. You go online, you scroll through Instagram or YouTube, and you are just immediately bombarded with advice on proper form.
Oh, it's endless. It's always, you're doing it wrong. You need to run like a gazelle, get off your
It's
heels.
demonized.
Completely. It's
Oh.
become this moral hierarchy where heel striking is a sin and landing on your toes is salvation. But today, we are going to look at the actual data. We're stripping away the influencer noise and looking specifically at the biomechanical and clinical perspectives provided by sun-dried.
Which is exactly what we need to do, because the common wisdom, as you say, isn't always backed by, physics.
So, the mission for this deep dive is simple but critical. Is there actually a right way to land? Or are we all just stressing ourselves out, chasing trends that might actually be hurting us?
It's the million-dollar question.
Mm.
And the answer lies in understanding biomechanics, not just repeating what we see on social media.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Before we can talk about which one is best, we need to understand what we're actually doing with our feet. The sun-dried materials break this down into a sort of taxonomy of landing.
Yeah.
If we freeze frame a runner right at the moment of impact, what are we looking at?
In the biomechanical literature, we generally group these into three main buckets. It's all based on exactly where that initial contact happens.
Okay.
First, and by far the most common, is the rear foot strike, or RFS.
The classic heel strike.
Exactly. This is when the initial ground collision happens at the heel, or the posterior part of the calcaneus. Biomechanically, if you look at the ankle, the toes are usually pointed up, that's dorsiflexion, and the knee is usually extended or pretty straight.
Yeah. And according to the data, this is what almost everyone does, right? Even the people who think they don't.
It is overwhelmingly the default. About 94% of recreational runners are rear foot strikers.
94%. That is a massive majority.
It is. And what's fascinating is that if you survey runners, a huge chunk of them will claim they land on their midfoot.
Right.
But you put them on a treadmill with a high-speed camera, slow it down, and boom, heel first.
So we have a bit of a delusion about our own running form.
We really do. Then, moving down the foot, you have the midfoot strike, or MFS. This is a much flatter landing.
Okay.
It's often considered a transitional state where the heel and the ball of the foot hit pretty much simultaneously.
And finally, the one everyone seems to be chasing.
The forefoot strike, or
Huh?
FFS, this is landing on the metatarsal head, the ball of the foot. Here, the heel is actually off the ground at the moment of impact.
Mhm.
The ankle is plantar flexed, meaning toes are pointed down, and the knee is usually more bent. This is what you'd see in sprinting or
Right.
barefoot running.
Now, that leads to an interesting point the sources bring up. We have 94% of people heel striking, yet we're told it's unnatural. Is there any truth to that?
Well, there is a historical and an evolutionary argument there.
Mm.
If you look at human history, we likely ran barefoot or in very thin leather coverings for millennia.
Sure.
Now, have you ever tried to heel strike barefoot on concrete?
Once, I think I bruised my heel bone in about 3 steps. It's incredibly painful.
Exactly. Your body has a feedback loop. If you run barefoot, you naturally shift to a forefoot or midfoot strike to use the foot's natural padding.
Oh.
But in the 1970s, everything changed. A modern running shoe was developed.
Enter the foam wedge.
Right. These shoes introduced a heel-to-toe drop, usually about 8 to 12 millimeters of foam under the heel. This mechanically facilitates and essentially encourages landing on the heel. It took away that pain signal.
So the shoe created the habit. But here is where it gets really interesting. We have this massive group of heel strikers, and we have this loud minority saying we should all be forefoot strikers to stop getting injured.
But the physics tells a different story.
This is the core aha moment of the research. We have to look at the forces. It's not just about where you land, but how the ground hits you back. This is the ground reaction force.
Okay, walk us through the difference. What happens to my skeleton when I heel strike versus when I guess, toe strike?
When you land on your heel in RFS pattern, the data shows a very rapid high-magnitude impact peak within the first 50 milliseconds.
It's a sudden slam.
Yes, it's a shockwave, a sudden deceleration of the lower leg. That shockwave travels straight up the bone from the heel, up the tibia, through the knee, and into the hip.
Okay, so that sounds objectively bad, a skeletal shockwave.
It does.
And I assume the forefoot strike fixes that?
Well, it changes the curve. If you land on your forefoot, that sharp impact peak, it just disappears. The curve becomes smoother. You don't get that sudden skeletal slam.
See, logic prevails. Eliminate the slam, eliminate the injury, everyone should switch to their toes.
But that is the trap. And this is what the sun-dried source calls the injury redistribution hypothesis. I love that term. It sounds very official, but also kind of ominous.
It's a perfect description. Energy cannot be destroyed. It has to go somewhere. Changing your foot strike does not remove the load. It simply moves it.
Okay.
Think of it like a household budget.
Okay, I'm with you.
Let's say you're spending $1,000 a month on car repairs. That's your knee injury. You decide, I'm done with this, so you sell the car and start walking everywhere.
Right.
You've saved the car money. But now you're spending $1,000 a month on expensive orthotic shoes and foot massages.
You haven't actually saved any money. You just moved the line item in the spreadsheet.
Exactly. You've just shifted the expenditure. With a heel strike, you are spending your budget on the skeleton, specifically the knee and the shin bone.
Right.
That's why heel strikers are prone to runner's knee, tibial stress fractures, and hip issues.
And if we switch to the forefoot to save the knee...
You stop spending on the knee, but you dump that entire budget and then some onto the soft tissue, specifically the Achilles tendon and the calf muscles.
And the cost is high. I saw a stat in the notes that made my jaw drop.
The loading factor.
Yes. The sun-dried text mentions that a forefoot strike increases the load on the Achilles tendon by approximately 48 times the runner's body weight per mile.
Just try to visualize that. 48 times your body weight. That is the cumulative tension you are asking that tendon to manage over the course of a single mile. It's an immense amount of load.
So if I'm a recreational runner and I just decide I'm going to run like a pro on my toes starting tomorrow because I saw a video,
you are almost guaranteeing an Achilles tendinopathy or a calf strain. The data is clear. Neither pattern definitively reduces the overall injury rate in uninjured people.
Really?
You are essentially choosing between risking a knee injury or risking an Achilles injury.
It's a pick your poison scenario.
In a way, yes. Unless you have a specific reason to change, like a knee that just won't heal, you aren't making yourself safer, you're just changing the location of the risk.
This connects directly to the shoes we wear, too. We touched on the 70s invention of the cushion shoe, but now we have these maximalist shoes, you know, the Hoka-style giant marshmallows on your feet.
The cushioning paradox.
Yeah, explain that, because intuitively, more cushion should mean less impact, right? It's like landing on a mattress versus landing on concrete.
You would think so. But the body is a complex sensing machine. We rely on proprioception, sensory feedback from the nerves in our feet to tell our brain how hard the ground is.
So what happens when you wrap the foot in 2 inches of foam?
You effectively blindfold the feet. The brain can't quite feel the impact. It doesn't get that crisp signal that says, we have hit the ground.
So what does the brain do?
It panics, essentially. It directs the leg to hit the ground harder to find stability and confirmation of the surface.
No way.
Yes. Studies show that runners in maximalist shoes often exhibit increased loading rates because they are essentially stomping through the foam to find the earth.
That is wildly ironic. You buy the clouds to save your legs, and you end up stomping like a giant.
It creates a false sense of protection. And then, on the flip side, we have the minimalist trend. The zero-drop shoes that look like gloves for your feet.
Right.
The idea is to return us to our natural state.
The barefoot vibe. I have friends who swear by this.
And for some, it works. But the sun-dried source highlights a very specific danger zone here. Research indicates that 86% of runners who switch to minimalist shoes too quickly get injured in the first 6 weeks.
86%. That is statistically almost everyone who tries it.
It's carnage. Because, again, you are stripping away the heel support and forcing that forefoot strike. The tissues simply aren't ready.
Wow.
And there's a weight factor, too.
Right. Physics implies mass equals force.
Precisely. Runners over 85 kilograms, that's about 187 pounds, are 3 times more likely to get injured in minimalist shoes.
Because the load on the Achilles is just too high.
Exactly. The lighter you are, the easier it is to dance on your toes. If you are heavier, the tensile strength required in your Achilles to keep your heel off the ground becomes unsustainable very quickly.
So we've busted the safety myth. Now let's talk about speed, because I think the other reason people switched maybe even more than injury prevention is vanity. They want to be faster. They think natural equals efficient.
This is the running economy question. Efficiency is basically gas mileage. How much oxygen do you need to burn to maintain a certain speed?
And the verdict?
For the vast majority of runners, the habitual strike, or whatever you do naturally without thinking, is the most efficient.
Because your body has optimized itself for that weird quirk you have.
Exactly. When you force a change, you are engaging muscles that aren't adapted to that work. You're firing stabilizers that usually get a free ride.
Right.
That increases the metabolic cost. You burn more energy trying to run correctly than you would just running incorrectly.
But surely the elites are all on their toes. I mean, looking at the Olympics, they look like they're floating. We all want to look like Kipchoge.
That is the optical illusion of speed. And honestly, this was the most surprising part of the sun-dried data for me. They looked at elite raid runners, 75% of elite half marathoners. And get this, 81% of marathon runners are rear foot strikers.
Wait, really? 81% of the best marathon runners in the world are heel striking.
Yes.
That completely busts the myth. I think we have this image that to be elite, you have to look a certain way.
We confuse sprinting with distance running. If you are sprinting 100 meters, yes, you are on your toes to utilize elastic energy return.
Right, you need that pop.
You need that stiffness.
Yeah.
But for 26 miles, the metabolic cost of holding your heel off the ground is just too high. Landing on the heel allows for a momentary skeletal rest phase. It's actually more efficient for the long haul.
So if elites are heel striking and it's safer for my Achilles, why would anyone ever change? Is there ever a valid reason to undergo this transition?
Well, that leads us to the clinical protocols. The rule of thumb in the sun-dried clinical perspective is, if it ain't broken, don't fix it.
If you aren't in pain, keep doing what you're doing.
Correct. However, if you have a chronic recalcitrant injury, specifically something like knee pain that just will not go away despite rest and rehab, then switching to a midfoot or forefoot strike might be a valid medical intervention.
To shift the load away from the knee.
Exactly. You are prescribing the gait change as a tool, but, and this is a huge but, it is not an overnight fix.
The timeline mentioned in the sources, well, it's not what people want to hear.
It is daunting. We're talking about 18 to 22 weeks to safely retrain your gait.
That's nearly half a year of rehab, and there's a prerequisite test, right? The 25-rep rule.
Yes. This is a great takeaway for anyone listening who is thinking about trying this. Before you even attempt to run on your forefoot, you should be able to perform 25 single-leg heel raises on each side with perfect form.
That's harder than it sounds. I tried it in my kitchen while reading the notes. Around rep 15, things start shaking.
It is a reality check. If you can't do that, your calf does not have the strength to handle the impact of running. If you switch without that strength, you are inviting an Achilles tear.
And the process isn't just go run different. It involves plyometrics, pogo jumps,
heavy resistance training, and a volume increase of no more than 10% per week. It is a rehabilitation process, not a style choice.
Okay, so for the person listening who thinks, I don't want to spend 22 weeks in rehab, but I do want to run a bit safer, is there a middle ground? Is there a hack?
There is. And the sun-dried source calls it the alternative fix. It's not about how your foot lands, but how often it lands. Cadence. Step rate. This is the secret weapon.
How does taking more steps actually help the joints?
The mechanism is simple physics. If you increase your step rate by about 5 to 10% while keeping your speed the same, you are forced to take shorter steps.
So you stop overstriding.
Exactly. Overstriding is the real enemy here. That's when your foot lands way out in front of your body, usually with a locked knee. It acts like a brake.
Right.
You are literally fighting your own momentum with every step.
And that's where that big impact spike comes from.
Right. By shortening the stride, your foot naturally lands underneath your center of mass. This shifts the landing closer to the midfoot without you having to consciously contort your ankle or point your toes.
So you get the benefits of a flatter landing, the reduced impact, without the risk of forcing your calf to do work it can't handle.
Precisely. And you reduce the total impact force per step because you're in the air less. It's incredibly effective.
And the source mentions this is particularly important as we get older.
Crucial. As we age, particularly over 50, we lose ankle power. The studies show we can lose up to 47% of our ankle power as we age.
Wow, that's nearly half the engine gone.
So relying on a bouncy, calf-driven forefoot strike becomes much harder and significantly riskier. Older runners are actually much safer with a higher cadence and a rear foot strike because it provides more stability.
So if you're over 50, don't try to run like you're 20. Run like a very efficient 50-year-old. Short, quick steps.
High turnover. Think
Yeah.
quick feet.
Now, for the people who really want to geek out on this or who are struggling with persistent injuries, the source material talks about some pretty high-tech diagnostics.
Yes, specifically mentioning the infrastructure in places like Southend-on-Sea. But this technology is becoming globally available. We're seeing things like Footstrikes and 3D gait analysis.
This isn't just someone watching you jog on a treadmill anymore.
No. This is placing markers on your joints and using infrared cameras to build a skeletal model of your running. It can cost hundreds of pounds or dollars, but it tells you exactly where the forces are going. It takes the guesswork out.
It mentions Run 3D and force plate testing.
Huh.
But do you need that? If I'm just a guy trying to run a 5K, do I need a 3D avatar of myself?
The source argues that while the tech is fascinating, simple metrics often suffice. There's the visual analog pain scale,
Which is?
a fancy name for a simple rule. If pain exceeds a 3 out of 10, you stop. If pain lasts more than 24 hours after a run, you regress.
Right.
You don't need a 3D camera to tell you that. Your body is screaming it at you.
And the calf raise test we mentioned earlier.
Exactly. Those functional tests tell you more about your readiness than a slow-motion video ever could. If your calf is burning at rep 10, you aren't ready for forefoot running, no matter what your gait analysis says.
So let's bring this all home. We've covered physics, shoes, elites, and rehab. What does this all mean for us? Let's try to summarize this deep dive.
I think there are three main takeaways.
Mm.
First, 94% of us are heel strikers, and that is absolutely okay.
Right.
It's not a flaw. It's a standard human gait, especially in modern shoes.
So stop feeling guilty about your heels touching the ground.
Exactly. Second, remember the injury redistribution hypothesis. You cannot eliminate impact. You can only choose where it goes. Changing your strike just trades knee stress for Achilles stress. Know what you're bargaining for.
And finally,
Don't force a natural style if your body isn't conditioned for it. You can't undo a lifetime of wearing shoes in a few weeks. The risk usually outweighs the reward.
it really challenges the way we look at running. We see these idealized forms on Instagram and think we need to mimic them to be real runners.
It raises a concept I like to think of as optimization versus correction.
Ooh, tell me more.
Too often we try to correct our form to match an external ideal and aesthetic. We want to look like the Olympian.
Right.
But true performance comes from optimizing what you have. Are you serving your current anatomy, your stiff ankles, your hip width, your history of wearing boots? Or are you serving an aesthetic ideal that might snap your Achilles?
That is the question to ask yourself on your next run. Are you running for your body or for the imaginary camera?
Exactly.
Well, I'm definitely going to be counting my steps next time I head out. Maybe trying to bump that cadence up just a little bit.
A 5% increase. Start there.
5%. You heard it here first. Thanks for listening to this deep dive into running mechanics. Run safe, check your cadence, and we'll see you in the next one.